Well, good morning all, and welcome once again to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training, and this is my twice weekly live webcast. Clive and Kevin are both here. Good to see you, and good to see everybody else too. So, what have we got for you today in show 392? Well, we have the story that the Somali president's son has fled Turkey after a fatal motorcycle crash involving a courier. Northern Rail have banned bikes in Whitby station, which has upset various people. We'll have a look at the question of whether bike sales figures are actually promising and if the northeast of England does actually have better roads. Paul Varnsbury is asking us to help him get on top of the online ads for non-approved bike kit in the Facebook marketplace sales site. The new Enfield Himalayan price is out. Is it too high? And we'll have a look at the PNY Ponie cargo motorcycle, something I might have been interested in back in the day when I was a courier. And then finally today we'll have a look at the in-depth item, which is all about experience, Groundhog Day, and how we learn by repetition. So this is continuing my series on crashing. So sit yourselves down for the next 35 minutes or so. Don't forget, if you want to catch up with these shows, I'll come on to that in a moment. If you have got a question or a comment on any of the topics today, do drop me a line. I'm more than happy to answer those. Always interested to see what you have to say about the stories. So, all right, so let's press on then with the first bit of the show. Well, first thing I just want to say is that live events are back. Don't forget, the next talk is 8 p.m. Monday, 18th December, and this is going to be on workload. It's all about how our brain processes the limited amount of information it can deal with, but pretends to give us the full picture of our environment around us. I hope this will be a good antidote to Christmas shopping. And don't forget, you can also still watch the full Science of Being Seen presentation that went out on Monday the 20th. You can watch that on catch up. If you do want to head over to either of those, then just simply look at the screen now. You'll get a pop-up coming up which tells you what is coming next. Okay, and don't forget, as I say, if you've got a question or a comment, do drop me a line. I'm more than happy to answer that. I'll try to get to during the show. If I can't, it'll be after it. All right, okay, so what have we got for you today? Well, it's the weather, and we'll start. No, it's not. I've just done that one. That's the live events. That's the wrong image. Forgot to put that one up. Never mind. Here's the weather one. Well, today it looks like a rather breezy, grey and damp day. It's fairly miserable here at the moment. There's a little bit of brightness appearing, but it's pretty grey and overcast. And there's been some light rain this morning. It looks like that'll continue through most of the day. It becomes showery late in the afternoon and through the evening. Now, Thursday is likely to start cloudy. There'll be some outbreaks of rain and drizzle, gradually clearing southeastwards, and it'll become largely dry. Bright or sunny spells developing in some places in the afternoon. Temperatures about normal for the season. Now, further ahead, looking towards Sunday, there's a good deal of dry weather around, but it will remain mostly cloudy. There'll be some patchy light rain and drizzle on windward coasts. Could be a little bit brighter in the middle of the country. Breezy but mild is the forecast for the weekend. So, not too bad for riding motorcycles. Now, okay, on with the news. Now, the first story is all about the son of Somali's president. He has apparently fled Turkey after killing a local motorcycle courier in a crash in Istanbul. Now, Turkish media have been reporting that Mohammed Hassan Sheikh Mohammed, who's the Somali president Hassan Sheikh Mohammed's son, hit 36-year-old Yunus Emre Gosa with a diplomatic car registered with Somali's embassy on the 30th of November. Now, Gosa was taken to a nearby hospital unconscious and placed in intensive care, but sadly died a week later. Now, Mohammed told police at the scene that the courier stopped suddenly in the road and that he wasn't wearing a helmet, and that's what caused the crash. But an Istanbul prosecutor has launched a formal investigation against Mohammed. He asked police to take testimony and ordered his subsequent release, despite a petition from lawyers representing Gosa to impose measures to prevent Mohammed from fleeing the country. Now, subsequently, footage of the incident actually emerged, and it did show the motorcycle slowing down rather suddenly, but it also reveals that Mohammed's car was speeding and hit the motorcycle from behind. The video also shows Gosa wearing a helmet, although that did come off following the crash. Now, the investigators concluded from the video that the Somali president's son was primarily at fault for the collision, and 2 days after the courier's death, the Istanbul public chief prosecutor office issued an arrest warrant, but on trying to serve it, they discovered that he had actually left for Somalia on a flight 6 days earlier. An investigation's also been launched into police officers who apparently drafted an initial report saying that Mohammed was not at fault. It's reported that the police officers told the courier's family that he died by suicide. Now, the Somali presidency, perhaps predictably, has not commented on that particular issue. Now, it's a long time since I've been to Whitby, but even then it was a flying visit. I can't say I know the town at all well. But back during the COVID, it was a popular spot for bikers to break the rules and head out to the fish and chip shop there. And quite a few riders were pulled up and fined for being out of their home area. I reported on that story at the time. Now the town's under scrutiny again, as the BMF have reported that they are, quote, alarmed to hear the news of a surprise ban on motorcycles that has been imposed at Whitby railway station by the owners of Northern Rail. So what's all this about? Well, this is the sign that appears to have gone up. It shows that it says quite clearly no motorcycle parking in this car park, and it says at the bottom there, if you zoom in and read it, that there is a penalty of £50 for violating that. So this appears to be connected with the Whistle Stop Cafe, which has been welcoming bikers to share its fabulous food and hospitality for many years. And it seems there is a bike night held at the cafe during the summer on Thursday evenings. But now Northern Rail's Joseph Creamer says that, quote, Northern Trains has not granted permission for this gathering. Presumably then they are using the railway station car park for parking their bikes to attend the cafe. Now, I'm not surprised. The cafe owners have, quote, expressed their shock and frustration and are worrying about the impact on their business. Gemma and Paul Lonsdale, who run the cafe, which is adjacent to the railway station building, they said in a Facebook post that the signage was out of their control and, quote, we are gutted that this has happened and unfortunately there is nothing we can do. Northern Rail own the car park, so it's their decision. Now, talking of their bike nights, they said, in the summer we do a lot of trade from bikers and the majority are no hassle at all. But presumably, where's the photo gone? Oh, good grief. Okay, I've lost the photo, which was supposed to show the bike bay. It's disappeared. All right, never mind. There, if you go and look on Google Maps, you'll find that there was a tiny motorcycle parking bay outside the cafe, and that was back in June this year. That photo was taken. So my guess is that what's been happening is that bikes have been overflowing into adjacent car parking spaces. Now, the BMF have written to Northern Rail. They express their concern over the impact on riders who want to park at the station before catching a train, which is a very, very valid point, of course. But they've also suggested that questions have been asked over whether the ban can be legally enforced. Well, since the car park appears to be private property, my understanding is that it's up to the owners, Northern Rail, who decide who can park there. There are certainly car parks in Oxford, for example, which specifically exclude motorcycle parking. Now, unfortunately, the rest of the BMF press release then descends into the sort of all too common victim mentality. Calling the ban an act of discrimination is taking it a little bit far, really, isn't it? And the local MAG group have used the same kind of language, and they've also threatened a peaceful demonstration. Now, my thinking is that it would be far more useful for everybody to sit down and discover just why the ban has been imposed before knee-jerk reactions of demonstrations and claims of discriminations are flung about. If you want my guess, it might not be unconnected with noise complaints, and it might not be unconnected with riders leaving the cafe late on Thursday nights, but it would be useful to find that out, wouldn't it, before reacting. So, thanks to Malk for that story, by the way. Okay, so, all right, on with some more news. Hopefully I've got the right picture this time. Yes, where we are. Now, sometimes I really do get very depressed with the standard of journalism in our motorcycle press. Now, MCN, our supposedly premier weekly paper, they reported on promising 2023 industry sale figures as the MCIA, the Motorcycle Industry Association, they released the up to the end of November registration data for the year to date, so 11 months worth. What was it promising about it? Well, it's to be up in many categories compared with 2022, which sounds good right until you actually look at the number of registrations, and then you find that the latest year-to-date sales compared with the previous year 2022 and the up to November figures for then actually shows a drop, not a huge drop, it's less than 1%, 0.7%, but what it means is it's fairly obvious that the up in those promising categories must have been matched by a down in some less than promising categories. Now go further back and the picture actually doesn't look any better really. In 2021, you'll recall that was the year that got off to a slow start because the UK was still in lockdown early on. There were actually a total of 114,371 motorcycles sold, and that compares pretty favourably with the up to the end of November figures of 102,000. If you add sort of 10% to that ish, you would get 112,000. But you know, as a guesstimate towards the end of December, but I doubt we'll make that figure. So it looks like 2023's figures are going to be down on 2021, and that year was up on the 104,000 registrations in 2020. That was the year hit by COVID, but the pre-lockdown figure was also about 107,000. So basically what we're saying here is that the sales have been flatlining for the last 4 or 5 years. Now you may recall that back in October the MCIA proposed a new license class for 22 kilowatt motorcycles, and their plan was that these could be ridden by riders without actually having to pass the bike test, and that their plans would see these riders taking first a CBT, which will be valid for 2 years, then an enhanced CBT for that they could ride on for 2 years, and then at the end of that they could upgrade automatically to this new class of motorcycle. And you can see really with sales flatlining just why the MCIA wants to encourage riders to upgrade to a new machine. Meanwhile, head over to the More Bikes website, which is the mouthpiece for Lexman Insurance. They claimed that riders in the northeast, quote, may have less to worry about when it comes to road surfaces and potholes because, quote, 96% of motorways, B and C roads in the area are not currently needed to be considered for improvement. So what did I notice about that? Well, they left out A roads. I wonder why. Anyway, there's likely to be a big difference between not needing improvement, which I'm sure most of us would take to mean that the road was actually in good condition, it wasn't worn out and potholed, and not being considered for improvement, which I rather suspect is code for, yes, the road is full of holes, we would like to resurface it, but we can't do it because there are other roads in an even worse state and we haven't got the cash to fix all of them. So I very much doubt there's actually much difference between the northeast of the UK and anywhere else in the country. Right, okay, don't forget, if you are enjoying the show, set a reminder every Wednesday and Sunday at 11. The 11s goes out normally live, occasionally it goes out recorded, and very, very rarely I miss a show altogether. As I'm away for a couple of days in the not too distant future, I may have to do a recorded show or I might miss it out, I'm not sure yet. But if you want to catch up with the old shows, if you've missed one, Survival Skills UK on Facebook is the place to go, and they all have their own playlist to make them easy to find. So head over to my YouTube channel, and don't forget you'll find my safety videos over there, the 60-second safety and the 60-second science series. Watch out for those too. Right, okay, so now PVA PPE UK Limited is asking for motorcyclists to get involved to get posts on Facebook Marketplace promoting untested and non-certified motorcycle kit deleted. These for sale adverts are appearing in the essentially unregulated marketplace, and they include clothing, gloves, boots, and impact protection. If you go to Facebook and have a look, you'll find them. There's lots of them. Now, the man behind the company is the clothing guru Paul Vansbury, and he says that asking if the kit has been tested to the European standard and certified will simply lead to your question being deleted, and then you'll find that you're blocked from asking further questions. He says that's their standard operating procedure. So he has devised a way to post your concerns and not have them instantly deleted. What he suggests is that you do this, quote, first post a negative review on the seller's main Facebook page, copying and pasting the following as your comment. And he suggests that you write, have your motorcycle clothing products been independently tested to European standards and certified by an official body, unquote. Now, if the advertiser provides evidence that they are meeting the legal requirements, then you can go back to your review and you can reverse it. You can turn it into a positive review. He says only after posting this negative review, paste the text as a question under the product ad or post. And he says the reason for doing it this way is that if your question is deleted and you're blocked, it can't affect your negative review. That will be there permanently. But if you post the question first and then get blocked, you won't be able to post the negative review, so nobody else will know that you ever took some action to ask the company selling the product a question, and that's the reason to post the review first. Now, Paul says, I have challenged and reported so many in the last nearly 6 years that the Facebook algorithm appears to severely limit the number of ads I see, so I rely on others on Facebook to keep me updated on what is happening. So as you spot adverts for uncertificated clothing, send them to Paul and he can do something about it, but do something yourself. And as I said when I posted my comments on this yesterday on Facebook, on my Facebook page, it's your choice what you wear, but you deserve to be able to make a choice from kit that has been through the testing procedure, if that's what you want to get hold of. Right, okay, so next story, very quick one. This is the new Royal Enfield 450 Himalayan. This is actually the special edition version. I'm not quite sure which one, but it's basically said to be Royal Enfield's most significant motorcycle to date. That depends really whether you want an off-roady style bike or you're looking for something else. But anyway, it is a big upgrade on the previous Himalayan, and it's said to be an adventure tourer designed to handle any road or lack thereof. It made its debut in the Milan Xmas show last month, and it's now been revealed that it will hit European roads in March 2024. So I suspect that will be already quite a few people getting orders in advance. But it comes with a starting price of £5,750. Well, that's not particularly expensive when you look at some of the competition from the Japanese manufacturers, but it may be a little bit much for the buyers of the previous generation of Royal Enfields to swallow. What do you think? Is that too much? Is it a reasonable price, or could they even have charged more? Drop me a line, tell me what you think. I'd be very happy to hear what you have to say about that. Right, okay, last show I asked who are Arctic Leopard. This was on the Dakar Mission 1000 event that I was talking about, which is running alongside the main Dakar race over a special shorter course for alternatively powered vehicles. Well, it turns out that they are the manufacturers of what are called high performance or off-road electric motorcycles. So those are the two bikes that I found online, promoted by Arctic Leopard. It says they focus on the user experience. Well, who wouldn't really? Power, long battery life, lightweight frames and agility. So I'll be interested to see how they perform in the Dakar. Right, now just 10 years ago it was that Deliveroo set up their organisation here in the UK. Uber have subsequently established themselves too, but it was COVID that really changed the way that the food we eat gets to our plate. With everybody locked down for months, many people started to rely on these services to actually bring food directly to our houses, and that has carried on over into the post-COVID period. It has dropped back, but there's still an awful lot more food delivered to homes than there used to be. But what if you want to deliver something a little bit larger? Now obviously people also got parcels delivered to the home, and the delivery companies like Amazon, for example, they've turned to cargo bikes. There are pedaled ones, there are electrically assisted ones, but what do you do for the next step up? Do you overload a motorcycle, or do you trek around with an almost empty small van? Or could you use a cargo motorcycle? Now, for the last few years of my own time as a motorcycle courier, you would actually have seen me towing a small trailer most days, and that actually, well, significantly increased my payload. So at the time, though, I would have been interested definitely in a motorcycle that didn't have to tow a trailer but could still haul a decent load. Now, one option for this comes from a Swedish brand called Cake. They have a couple of bikes out. They're pretty utilitarian. They're not particularly attractive. You probably wouldn't want to ride one down to your the Whitby cafe and be judged by your peers. But they come with modular elements like front and rear racks and a passenger seat, which can be popped on and off depending on what you want to do with the bike. But they aren't exactly cheap. Their moped class Macca costs 4,400 before you add any of the bolt-on bits, and the 55-mile-per-hour Ossa is nearly £9,000, which is pretty darned expensive. So this particular machine caught my eye, which appeared at the Milan show. This is the PNY Ponie, an electric cargo motorcycle which is said to be designed for hauling heavy loads in tight spaces, and it would in theory fill the gap between e-bike and small van deliveries. Now it's designed to carry significant weights, 265 pounds, 120 kilograms of cargo in addition to the rider, so hopefully it's got some fairly robust tyres as well, and it has no less than 400 litres, which is 14 cubic feet of storage space on board. Now for comparison's sake, they say that a city car's boot trunk often has around 300 litres or less of space. So what you can see here is the bike with the 3 insulated food bags, one carried on the rack, 2 more fit into the center section of the frame. Now the bike is propelled by a hub motor, 4 kilowatt hub motor, that helps free up space for these bags to fit in the hole in the middle, and it's claimed that that motor will push the bike to 100 kilometers per hour, which is actually 62 miles per hour, and I have a little trouble believing that, quite frankly. I can't honestly see 5.4 horsepower getting the thing anywhere near that speed. 45 miles per hour I would suspect is probably more likely to be its top speed, maybe 50 at a squeak, because generally speaking you need about 10 horsepower, 7.5 kilowatts to get to 60 miles per hour. Now the range from the 6.7 kilowatt hour battery said to be up to 150 kilometers, 93 miles. Now obviously that's going to be the maximum range. It may not sound much, but when I was doing a full day's dispatching in London, I would typically cover 80 to 90 miles. That was roughly my average. My typical weekly mileage was somewhere around 400 plus miles. So it's probably just about adequate for the best part of a day's work. You do get ABS brakes, which would be pretty useful, I should think, on something of this size and weight. A CarPlay ready 7-inch colour screen, so I guess you can get your navigation on that. And there's a glove box on the bike where you can put your phone to run your navigation app, which includes a USB charging port. Now, if 2 wheels aren't enough, you can go look at the alternative. This is the 3-wheeled Pony, and this is said to be coming soon. This one, you can see that there is a lockable storage box that's been put into the hole in the middle. You can still carry another bag on the frame, by the way, at the back. It appears to be a pillion seat, although I couldn't see any pillion foot pegs on the original photograph. But if you want the extra stability, this one looks like it could be a goer. The downsides, well, when you use this under seat storage area to carry your load, it means the battery appears to be built into the floor plan. You can probably see that better in the previous photo, actually. That looks like where the battery is, and this of course means that you can't swap it out. So if it's a sort of bike which you pick up and ride from a depot, you would presumably have to ride it back to the depot and take another one out if your battery went flat. And if you're owner operator, of course, once exhausted, it's either back home for the day and plug in, or find a roadside charger and sit it out. Now, the 2-wheel PNY Ponie 2, that's homologated and for use in Europe as a motorcycle to be ridden by A1 license holders. Deliveries of this should begin in the spring of 2024. One thing I did note, the Pony 3 with the 3 wheels, that's not yet fully tested, so we'll have to wait on that one. No price hints on this, which is a bit of a disappointment. I would like to know how much they want for this. I suspect it won't be cheap, however. And 2, I knew PNY as a company that manufactured computer flash drives because I happen to have one, but it turns out this is a different PNY, so whether they'll get away with the name when PNY, the flash drive company, discovers them, I don't know. But I had to do quite a bit of digging before I found anything out about them. As I said, there's no price, but neither is there any informational location about their website on their about page. There's no contact details at all. It turns out they're an Israeli startup that commenced operations in 2020, but I do wonder why they're so reticent about their location and history. Right, okay, so it's time to move on to the final item for the day. Now, just before I do that, I've got a little photograph here, which I will share with you. Here it is, coming up on screen now. Now, this was I was less than complimentary last week about the AA's advice to avoid potholes by not driving through a puddle, given that when it's raining, there are puddles everywhere. Hallam actually made a very good suggestion, and he said look out for puddles with stone chips scattered around them, and you can see exactly what he means in this photograph here, particularly up there on the curb. Can you see there are some quite big chunks of stone, and those have been dug out of the road base, and they're visibly different to the stone chips which come from the tarmac surface itself. They're much bigger, they're much more irregular, they're often a different colour. So spotting those is an excellent clue that you are actually looking at a genuine pothole and not just yet another puddle on our roads. So thank you, Hallam, very much for that. File that tip away in your memory banks, because I think that is a really, really valuable tip. Right, okay, so on to my final in-depth piece today. Now, I started a new series last week to try to give everybody something of an understanding of why we crash. And last week I suggested that simply blaming a crash on other people or the circumstances around us is actually just a lazy approach to trying to make sense of what happened. Now, today I want to talk about 3 things: experience, Groundhog Day, and how we learn by repetition. So let's start with the old chestnut. This is the idea that we learn by picking up experience. So learning by experience, repeating something, is often cited as the best way to learn. And if you go to the internet and you go to any motorcycle forum, you'll often see advice to for people to make the most of their training by going out and riding more. And people say you'll soon get the hang of it, that sort of thing. Now, inexperience certainly counts. Inexperienced riders do get themselves into trouble in novel situations. Basically, if we haven't experienced it, how do we know about it? And it's certainly hard to claim, as many accident studies do, that a novice rider who's never experienced a particular situation is demonstrating bad behavior when they don't actually know what the good behavior is that would keep them out of trouble. And this is a real problem with the way that we approach road safety in this country, in my opinion. As a new rider myself, when I got onto bikes in two wheels, I had a whole series of crashes, and they came out of the blue. I certainly wasn't expecting the things that went wrong to go wrong. And another factor that we know exacerbates the risk is to be inexperienced with a specific bike. If we swap machines, it's likely that we're not used to the bike that we're about to jump onto. Now, I remember when I had my 404 Honda, by which time I had clocked up quite a few thousand miles. I'd been around Europe on it. But I do remember borrowing one of the last air-cooled RD250s. It was the red and white heat model, for those of you who have a long memory. And I also remember trying to accelerate down the Tottenham Court Road and to pass, I think it was a bus that was about to pull out of a bus stop. And what happened was, as I twisted the throttle, it turned out I was in the wrong gear, the revs were too low, and the bike just bogged down. So instinctively, I did the four-stroke thing of giving it full throttle. My 404 would simply have gathered some speed at that point. Well, the two-stroke didn't really do anything. It sort of, the revs climbed a little bit, and then the two-stroke motor did its two-stroke thing. It hit the power band, and that caused me to wheelie, a totally voluntary wheelie, and I shot between two taxis on the back wheel just as a third pulled out of a side street in front of me, and that very nearly ended badly, and that was entirely down to my lack of familiarity with a two-stroke. But here's the big problem. Whilst I am unlikely to repeat that mistake again, because I have now learned, thanks to the school of hard knocks, the first thing is that I have to have had experienced that mistake. The second thing is I have had to survive it too. And this is where Groundhog Day comes in. Now, you may remember the movie, Bill Murray, and I can't remember who a co-star was now, appalling. His TV reporter character wakes up each morning and discovers as the day goes on that he is living the previous day, and this repeats over and over and over. And guess what? That is a metaphor for our experience on the road. Take the classic "sorry mate, I didn't see you" Smitsy collision, where the driver turns across the path of the bike. Now, we've all heard of it, but the fact is, many of us aren't very good at avoiding it. The problem is Groundhog Day. When we go riding here in the UK, the vast majority of drivers do not pull out in front of us. You only have to look at the statistics to see that quite obviously. Each year there are roughly 100 fatal junction collisions. There are around 1,000 serious injuries. Now, I don't think anybody's ever counted them, but if we guess that there may be 10,000 minor bumps, and let's add 100,000 near misses, and I mean near misses here, that still means 39,888,900 drivers see every bike they need to see every year. So yes, if a driver happens to pull out on us, we remember it. But what we don't consciously recall are all the drivers who didn't pull out. And if we do a lot of miles every year, there are going to be thousands of incidents where the driver simply sat tight, waited for us, and nothing happened. So what do we remember? Well, unfortunately, it's the subconscious brain, which controls the vast majority of our responses, which learns from this repetition. So our Groundhog Day experience is exactly that, that almost every driver sees us and doesn't pull out on us. So thanks to the way our subconscious determines our future actions, that's what we learn to expect. We learn to expect that what happened last time, the time before that, and the time before that is what will happen next time too. Even though we know about the problem of emerging drivers, our subconscious brain is what's in control almost all the time. Now, back in 2018, I was over in New Zealand, as you possibly know, and I was working on the Shiny Side Up events there with a motorcyclist called Simon. Now, he had had a bad crash a few months earlier where an access track emerged onto the main road. As he explained, he passed that access hundreds and hundreds of times on his way to work every day, and nothing had ever pulled out until the day that it did. And when that ute emerged into his path, he was caught totally cold and failed to take any evasive action. Now, this refers neatly to some research by a chap called James Ulay. He's an American researcher, and he worked with Harry Hurt on the eponymous Hurt report from the mid-70s, which you may have heard of. First real in-depth investigation into motorcycle collisions at junctions. But he's continued over the years to add to the knowledge base on junction collisions. And one of the most interesting things, well, most interesting to me, was a study he did into the relative ability of two different groups of riders to pull off effective mid-emergency responses, swerving or braking when a car turned into their path. Now, the two groups he chose were these. He chose to look at untrained riders from Thailand and California Highway Patrol cops from the USA. So here's a question for you. Which of those two groups do you think were better at taking evasive action mid-emergency? I'll have a guess that you probably said the expert US riders. If you did, remember Groundhog Day. What did those US riders experience day in, day out? Now, what do you think the Thai riders on their essentially unregulated roads experienced day in, day out? It was actually the Thais who were more likely to take effective emergency action. It's Groundhog Day. What happened yesterday happens today and will happen tomorrow. For the Thai riders, the threat of a turning vehicle was nothing new. They'd seen it all before, and crucially, they'd survived it too. The casualty rate in Thailand is pretty high, but not everybody, of course, ends up a casualty. Many riders do survive these kind of incidents. So each emergency was actually their own personal Groundhog Day. They were simply repeating the same thing that successfully got them out of trouble many times before. But for the US riders, it was the other way around. Their Groundhog Day was the opposite. Most US riders adhere to most of the rules most of the time, especially, of course, when they spot a bike cop. So the US police were hardly ever exposed to genuine emergency situations demanding an emergency response. Although they knew all about the Smidsy collision, subconsciously they weren't expecting an emergency to develop when they saw a car at a junction, and that's why they didn't respond effectively. Now, if you want one more proof of this, riders who've had a friend or a relative experience a serious crash usually demonstrate a change in their behavior immediately after the crash. They demonstrate that they are extra cautious in similar situations after the incident. But the effect seems to be time limited, as nothing goes wrong for them after their friends or relatives experience. As Groundhog Day repeats itself over and over and over and nothing happens, then gradually they revert to previous behavior and the caution drops away again. So this is actually a really crucial insight into the problem with relying on experiential learning as a road safety technique. And of course it works the other way around too. If you think about the drivers who are sitting there looking at us as we approach a junction, the vast majority of these drivers, 38,800,000 and something thousand that I just mentioned, they do not collide with motorcycles at junctions. The majority of drivers will never ever have a Smidsy crash in their entire driving career. So even though most drivers accept the sort of look twice for bikes advice as perfectly valid, and they will think, oh yes, I better remember that, their subconscious brain is going via its Groundhog Day experience. It's learned that nothing ever goes wrong from its past experience. So even if intellectually telling drivers to look twice for bikes has a possible short-term effect, it's very hard to change this behavior for a highly unlikely future event. And that's why I think it is that our regular look once, look twice for bikes campaigns seem to have had no significant effect on the junction collision. So here in the West, our experience is not teaching us to look out for more things that could go wrong. Groundhog Day, our experience is actually teaching us that nearly all the time that we're riding a bike, things go right. So we get to the point where basically our subconscious brain really does believe that nothing ever pulls out before, nothing will pull out today. And that's why even experienced riders get caught cold at junctions. They expect Groundhog Day, and instead it turns out to be the day at the end of the movie that breaks the endless loop. So that is it for today's show. Let me know what you think about that particular item. Why is Kevin saying ZZ? I have no idea. Right, so hopefully you found that insightful. There will be another item on this in a week's time as I look again into why it is that the brainy side of riding doesn't actually match what we're told about how we learn and experience riding, and why it is that sometimes we get things seriously wrong and we crash. All right, okay, thank you indeed for looking in today. Don't forget please the live online event. Don't forget that I don't get funded for my work on Science Being Seen, so if you turn up to one of these live webcasts and it costs you £6, remember that funding is going in to help me do all the research for Science Being Seen and all the other stuff I do research on too. So thank you for looking in today. It's been very nice to see you. Let me know if you found anything in the show interesting. As I say, I always want feedback on these events. Be back on Sunday with the next show, so watch out for Elevenses at 11 o'clock in a few days time, and I'll hopefully see you then. If you are out on the bike today, keep an eye on the weather. It's going to be a bit mixed, and stay shiny side up.